I'm ready to go.
Great. There's Jill. Okay, because I'm going to start with our roll call and note that the meeting is being recorded. You'll see that. And I'm going to start with the roll call because we are meeting virtually. So to conduct this meeting as an all virtual public meeting, the AHAC Executive Committee needs to make certain findings for the record to evidence our compliance with Virginia Code. These motions address this compliance. I'm going to conduct roll call and ask each board member participating in this meeting to state your name and your location, and ask that each of you pay close attention to make sure that we can hear each other on this call. So to start with Carrie Wilson, and I'm calling from Reston. Maura Williams.
Maura Williams, I'm calling from Reston.
Dr. Kincannon, Carrie Kincannon.
Carrie Kincannon, and I'm calling from the Mount Vernon district.
Joe Mondoro. Do not see Joe. Dr. Poggi.
Hi, Jerry Poggi, calling from my home in Vienna, Virginia.
Camilla McAfee.
Morning, Camilla McAfee, Arlington, Virginia.
Ava Nguyen.
Ava Nguyen from McLean, Virginia.
John Boylan.
John Boylan from Centerville, Virginia.
Nick Bracco.
Good morning, Nick Bracco here from Alexandria, Virginia.
Dr. Eleanor Vincent.
Good morning, Eleanor Vincent. I'm calling from Montgomery Village in Maryland.
Jill Norcross.
Good morning, Jill Norcross calling from Reston, Virginia.
That's great. And have I missed anybody else who's a member of the executive committee? And do we have any other guests? I see Mary Payden, who is a member of the AHAC, has joined us. Thank you, Mary. And I welcome our wonderful staff, Tom Fleetwood, Malia Strobel, Megan Van Dam. And with that, at this point, I would like to pass the virtual gavel to Maura Williams, who's the chair of the COC, so that I may make the appropriate motions. I move that the AHAC Executive Committee certify for the record that each member's voice may be adequately heard by each other member of the board.
So
We
moved.
have
Seconded.
Second.
Jerry.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any nays? Any abstentions? The motion carries.
Thank you, Maura. Second, I move that the AHAC Executive Committee will hold an all virtual public meeting because circumstances warrant, including but not limited to the convenience of an all virtual meeting.
Seconded.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any nays? Any abstentions? The motion carries.
I move that this all virtual public meeting comports with the all virtual policy that AHAC Executive Committee has previously adopted. And as a result, I further move that the AHAC Executive Committee conduct this meeting electronically through a dedicated video and audio conferencing line, and that the public may access this meeting by clicking the web link to the meeting on the AHAC website, which is www.fairfaxcounty.gov/AHAC/executive-committee under the August 25th, 2023 meeting information. I so move.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? The motion carries.
Thanks so much, y'all. And it's good to see everybody who is here. Thank you, Megan and Malia. Have the agenda up that you will have received. Want to just go over a couple of things in the opening. We do have 2 action items this morning. We'll have some conversation, but just a couple of things. Rip Sullivan sends his regrets. He was to be here today and got called away on business, but I would note that among other things, he has continued to keep us apprised and is going to be working, closely with Jerry Poggi and our legislative committee as we get ready for session. Earlier this week, Rip actually, when Governor Youngkin presented to the money committees regarding state finances and sort of what's coming up in the upcoming budget, one of the things that Rip really asked about and kind of pushed hard on is the fact that there's, 680,000, a bunch of fees that are in one of the environmental funds intended to support green movements, the RGGI fund, and it's been sitting there unappropriated general revenue that could be used to support low income households who are struggling right now. So those are a couple things he shared that he's continuing to work and to ask questions about our community and things that would support particularly low income neighbors here in Northern Virginia. So I share our thanks to him for always keeping Fairfax County and Northern Virginia in mind. On our agenda is a note about some of the membership news. We have, and forgive me we have had some of the reappointments confirmed for this July 1st through June 30th, 2024 term. And there are as well a couple of vacancies. Rip and I were confirmed for this year as your co-chairs. We still have vacancies in Dranesville District, Mason District, who will be nominating someone. I'm not sure whether that will happen now or after the new year, and reappointments within that. But Mason and Dranesville will have vacancies to be filled. We also have the number of appointments that Tom Fleetwood is able to make, and I appreciate Dr. Walton, John Boylan, Ava, Nick, Camilla, Dr. Vincent, Ryan Sheriff, who we announced last time has been appointed to serve as our financial institution rep, and Tara Ruskowski were all reappointed for this year. We have 3 appointees that Tom has available to consumer and an advocacy group appointee that we will keep you posted. And finally, for the supervisor appointees from other BACs, all of our current reps were reappointed or agreed to serve. We do have a vacancy for the ASSB, the Advisory Social Services Board, because Alice Bolts is retiring and moving out of the area. She is working, we are working with them. And I believe actually, no, that was for the CAB. Ken McMillan has tendered his resignation, has served us very well from CAB, and they have he was reappointed, but he has tendered his resignation. We do have a name, and we'll wait for the new individual to be appointed from the CAB. And then Community Services Board, Jennifer Adeli has gone off, and we're waiting for their appointment. And we do know that Abrar Amish is leaving the school board at the end of her tenure, and so we will be looking ahead to work with the newly elected school board chair and the superintendent for that appointment. So I just wanted to give you an update. One of the things that we've talked about, the importance is some of these are 1 or 2 year appointments coming up. We will be need to work out ahead to engage new people in the roles. Many of us have served for year after year, and so that's going to be some of our work in the upcoming session. Okay, so with that, I'm going to move now to the actually, I'm going to talk about any other announcements. I'm going to do that before we vote on the charter revision. One thing I wanted to mention, just thrilled, and I will send the link or post it in the chat, but at our last AHAC meeting, the staff shared the news about the new scholarship program that the FCRHA has set up to acknowledge and support residents of housing here, and there were 10 recipients awarded. Was thrilled to see that. There's $5,000 scholarships, and there's a great picture and notice that we can send around, and some of the stories of the people that have just really worked to kind of overcome the situation, what this scholarship means for them, and they're supporting their further education is going to be terrific. So Tom, I just want to acknowledge that. It's a great program.
Thanks so much, Carrie. Really, really proud of our scholarship awardees who really have an incredible, each one of them has an incredible story, and it just reminds you that behind every door, there is a really human story that just reminds you of why we're doing what we're doing here. So very proud of that. Very proud of the staff that worked on it.
Thank you. And I see that before we go on, I see that Dr. Poggi's hand is up. Jerry?
I think Eleanor was ahead of me.
Oh, I can't see, so if I
Oh,
miss you,
sorry.
yeah, go ahead, Eleanor.
It's okay. I actually just had a quick question since you were talking about memberships,
Mhm.
because this just came to me, or I would have asked it before. So with the change in the COC board, with the restructuring and all of that, how's that going to impact representation from the COC to this committee? And I can wait if we've not got there yet, but it just came to me. I thought I'd put it out there.
We have asked that we continue to have that designated representative. Maura Williams currently serves here as the chair of the COC, and yes, Chairman McKay and others will be naming that group. So Tom, do you have any other updated information? We know that there will still be a strong connection, and I know that some of you have already been asked to serve on the new COC, so we'll hope that you'll be able to bring that back.
I can just report on that we are, we're beginning to see a steady flow of appointees for it, and we're optimistic we're going to be in good shape to get going this fall.
Thanks, Eleanor. Jerry?
Yeah, I just wanted to say in regards to people who are cycling off that, if we could do some formal gratitude for their service while they were with us, I think that would be a very honorable thing to do. And I don't know who would do it or how we would do it, but clearly we want to build their continued support for the good work that we're trying to achieve. And you might cycle off, but I always consider you a potential advocate for the larger cause. And Tom, if it's not breaking confidentiality, those new young people getting scholarships would also be terrific spokespeople if they felt comfortable in speaking up about the importance of public housing supports.
Yeah. And I think that's something to look at, as well as we know there'll be, consumer appointees on the COC as well. Jerry, I will say that we have tried to acknowledge when we know someone is leaving. Before that, I have done a letter of thanks to each of the folks, and I've actually still tried to talk to the people exiting to do an exit interview with them. But I've sent a letter of thanks to the Centerville Immigration Forum is having its annual dinner and anniversary dinner. They'll be honoring Alice and Jerry Foltz. So I did send a letter acknowledging Alice's many contributions, including to AHAC and others. Right. Just on behalf, I took the liberty, but I think that's important.
Thanks so much.
So any other, and I don't know, do we want to take the agenda down so we can see everybody? Does everybody have the agenda available to them? Because I think we may actually, that might be easier, just make sure I don't miss anybody.
Hey, Carrie, Megan had wanted to make a comment.
Oh, great. Sorry, Megan.
Oh, my apologies for the interruption. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to let you know, Joe Mondoro has joined the group.
Oh.
So if we could just check in with his sound and let him introduce himself and state where he is calling in from, that would be great.
Great.
Welcome, Joe.
Hi, good morning. Sorry I was late. Joe Mondoro calling from my home in McLean.
Great. And
Sure.
I know that everybody can hear him. And I want to note that AHAC member Joe Fay has also joined us.
Oh, great.
Good morning.
Thanks,
Morning.
Joe. Great. Well, then the next item was to take action on the charter that our revised charter. We talked about this again in a previous meeting. Megan, maybe are you able to show that? But as we know, our initial charter included this Continuum of Care Committee as an established committee under AHAC, and that is being moved. So we've just made a few updates to our agenda or to our charter. It's going to go to the Board of Supervisors for review that to reflect that change. And to Eleanor's comment earlier, we have left in the revision to the charter the understanding our role certainly to monitor the strategic housing plan, but we also note and have made comment focusing on the things that intersect. And certainly homelessness is a result of not having housing. So that's something that we know that AHAC will continue to be involved in. And I did send, and I apologize, I sent around just before the meeting the marked up version so you could see the exact changes that were made, but really just in the structure in terms of the committees, how we operate, that we struck the specific language around the COC, but continue to see homelessness there as a focus of our work. So I
Carrie,
don't
do
know
we
if there are
need a
questions
motion
or
to
comments?
accept the
Yes, thank
change
you.
and then start conversation for any
Yes,
changes? So I so move that we accept the revised charter and seek to have it passed on to the boards of supervisors for their reflection.
thank you. Do I have a second?
I second it.
It's Nick. Okay, thank you. All right, any comments, questions?
A question. So
Oh.
Carrie, it's Eleanor. So you
Yes.
had made a note about maybe incorporating legal components into that. I'm just curious to see if you got any input on that or if that's still pending. You had made a note on the
Yeah.
draft copy.
It was more our original charter did not acknowledge our work as a BAC operating under the confines of VFOIA. And so that is stated there now, just sort of understanding, because that really is an important piece of this and how we operate in the public sphere and the work that we need to do.
Okay, so you have what you needed. I
Think
guess is my
so.
question. Okay, good. Thank you.
Megan, I couldn't even begin to see this, but sorry, on the screen, I can't, but thank you. So any other comments? So we still focused on, and you see that this note will be removed. Any other comments? If not, I'll call the question and all in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Any opposed? Or extension? Thank you. The new charter will go forward and we will begin to look at that. Thank you. Any other announcements for the good of the order as we get started? Eleanor.
You know, it's an announcement and it's an acknowledgement. I was at the APA Oakwood Meadow ribbon cutting yesterday. We missed you, Tom, and everybody was talking about you. Tom wasn't there, but you were acknowledged and your team was acknowledged very appropriately because of all the work that went into that development. It's an absolutely beautiful development. I'm not going to steal your thunder, Tom. You can talk about it in your remarks, but I just wanted to say it was really gratifying to see that come to fruition. You know, we had walked it when it was just a foundation. We walked it while they were building there, and we are fortunate to have a partnership with APA in terms of providing some of the supportive services to folks who are going to be living there. But it was just beautiful, and the people that are living there are so so happy and so grateful. It's just a culmination of all the work that goes on behind the scenes that we don't see or even fully appreciate. So wanted to put that out and to say thank you, Tom, for all of the work that made that happen.
It's very kind. Thank you very much. We were really proud of that one.
I have a question. I'm wondering, Tom, if you could give us an update on North Hill. I walked around it this past Sunday and was disappointed to see that it's still empty. Nobody's been moving into the apartments there yet, and it's been a couple of months since the ribbon cutting. I'm wondering if you could give us an update when you expect people to be moving in.
Sure. Thanks for that, Carrie. And, let me just, first say that we share the disappointment. There are a number of factors at work there, many of which have to do with the residuals of the pandemic and supply chain problems, getting the very last loose ends tied up there. And that will allow them to get their certificates of occupancy on the rest of the buildings. They have C of Os on 2 of the buildings. They have completed the last bit of IT work on those buildings to be able to start having occupancy. So we do expect occupancy very quickly, but it has been extraordinarily frustrating, and I just want to acknowledge that. Not an optimal situation, certainly, but also very much the result of, trying to complete the execution of an extraordinarily complicated project. So should be just a couple more weeks here before people are living there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Yep.
Jerry?
Yeah, I just wanted to announce that later on this afternoon, the first gathering of the SHAPE committee focused on housing. SHAPE is a area-wide new plan that has the acronym SHAPE used, but the H in SHAPE will be meeting today, and it's on the housing and neighborhood supports needed for people as we age, and there will be recommendations issued through this group. So I will bring our meeting today to them, but also hopefully we can see the advantages in having this new group under the Council on Aging become stronger allies to our cause and their cause as well.
Thank you, Jerry. I'll include that in updates. We're preparing the link that shares the work that's being done.
Great. Thank you.
Anybody else? If not, I'll just mention one thing that before we go into Tom's report, but I'll mention that I attended or participated in a focus group that was held with members of all of the either chairs or members with the boards, authorities, and commission. And the idea was under the One Fairfax construct, sort of looking at BACs, how we feel we're doing in terms of equitable involvement, cross-section of the community. There were a lot of great questions about, how our BACs work. And it was a great opportunity. There were groups there in the focus group I attended, including the chair of the Tenant Landlord Commission and the chair of the Disability Services Board, who Cookie has represented so well on AHAC, and Long-Term Care Coordinating Committee. And one of the things that came out in the conversation was how much, again, cross-connected issues, and that we're all talking about the things. And you'll hear when I talk about our work plan and a recommendation that I'm hearing from all of us, that was an opportunity really to think about how we might engage some of those individuals. I will say the gentleman who chairs the Tenant Landlord Commission really had some great ideas, and I shared Mary Payton's contact information with him following the meeting, and kind of talked with him about some of the fair housing work. So he's going to join us at a future meeting. So just wanted to acknowledge that. And we talked about everything from how we meet, technology available, how our meetings accessible to more members of the committee. And frankly, most of the commissions feeling very disappointed that they have a lot of empty seats and not a lot of engagement. And I said, well, that ain't the problem at AHAC. So, but moving the agenda forward is and will continue to be. So it was a good panel. So I just wanted to share that. And with that, I'm going to then turn it over to Tom to give us an update on things, including some work that they're doing, some hearings that we can be involved in, some public outreach on relocation. I think he and Megan are going to discuss that. Tom, it's yours.
So I think I might, thank you, Carrie. I think I might just start with just a little bit of a report out from the Housing Committee earlier this month. Number one, for those of you that didn't get to see it, the board was very engaged during the discussion, so engaged, in fact, that the main agenda item that I had planned we did not get to. So have to rethink how I order things on the agendas going forward. But there was a lot of engagement with respect to where we stand on the pipeline, and interest from the board about sort of connecting the pipeline to the resources to how this looks going forward. There was also quite a bit of engagement with respect to the preservation guidelines. We had expected that to be a pretty short discussion because I believe it was our second trip in front of them about the guidelines, and we'd also done some individual briefings, but they wanted to continue to have a discussion about it. And there's a lot of interest with respect to how we're going to put together updates to the relocation guidelines. I'm going to hand off to Megan here briefly about what that looks like going forward in terms of opportunity for engagement. But there was what we did not get to was the discussion that I had hoped to have with them with respect to home ownership and our work in the homeownership space, retooling our homeownership operation and looking at expanding our role, the housing authority's role as the local housing finance agency in terms of providing down payment and closing cost assistance for low and moderate income home buyers. We remain committed to that prospect. We have some one-time funds available for us to work with it, but I think just to be very candid, I think budget outlook going forward may be challenging relative to both the personnel and capital resources that would be needed for a substantial expansion of such an approach. So I am hopeful with respect to home ownership that we're going to be able to go back to the board with a more fulsome presentation in November at the Housing Committee. So that is where we are in that respect. I also just wanted to note and acknowledge in terms of things coming up on the pipeline that the board has moved forward with the initial steps to transfer a couple of very significant properties to the Housing Authority. One is the remaining county-owned parcel at what was formerly known as the Southeast Quadrant in Bailey's Crossroads. We're getting our wheels rolling in terms of preparing to make that opportunity available to our development community. We are also very excited to have Supervisor Faust has initiated the process to transfer the Dulles Green property to us. So that one we see as being a very significant opportunity out near the innovation station in the Drainesville district. coming up in the short term. I will, just for the good of the order, ask that if anyone has any ideas for a replacement cricket field in the meantime, do drop me a line. That concludes sort of my updates. I'm going to pause there for any immediate questions, and I'm happy to. And then I'd ask Megan to talk a little bit about what the next steps look like in terms of the relocation guidelines. I see Nick's hand is up.
Yeah.
Nick.
Yeah. So I have burned through my binge watching of other shows. I was wondering if the housing committee is recorded so that I can catch up on that meeting.
For those lacking in other viable means of entertainment, a recording of the housing committee is in fact available in video on demand on Channel 16's website.
Fantastic. Thank you.
I sent the copy of the progress report that Tom gave. I just sent that out to you all. But the recording has all the good stuff. Tom, I live out near the Dulles Green neighborhood, so I'm really upset that I'm going to lose my cricket field. So I'm going to be out there. So
well,
here.
I'm sure it's going to drive everyone batty.
Yeah. Yeah. Aw, very good.
Well, I wish I said that.
Yep.
Well,
Any other questions for Tom? There's been a lot of good things we'll continue to share. Megan has posted in the link, the link to the Board of Supervisors Housing Committee meeting. So I will make sure we get that out to you, but it's in the chat. All right.
Thank you, Megan.
Megan, do you want to update us and how we can be helpful on some of the work you're doing?
Sure. Thank you very much, Carrie. So, and I appreciate the time. As a spinoff of the preservation work that Bree and myself have been working on, we've been talking a lot about the relocation guidelines, and the board is very interested in those as well. And as you may be aware, the last time they were revised was in 2012. So we're going in to give a refresh, perhaps a bit of a restructure of the document itself with not only with a team of different housing staff who work in the relocation, so not just preservation, but also the rental group and the development group as well, and also our equity team will be working on this as well, and we're beginning to identify what needs to be updated, what's missing in the document, how it can better serve the county when we're looking at relocation issues. And we're planning to hold listening sessions in October. We don't have the dates identified, but we'd like to be able to gather the lived experiences of those who have been involved in relocation, and we're organizing that. And I've reached out to the Department of Neighborhood and Community Services as well to try to look at how those listening sessions may be structured. And I was talking with Carrie ahead of the meeting about, if you all would like or be interested in sort of thinking through and helping brainstorm how those listening sessions may be structured. I would certainly be open to hearing from you all about that. And those sessions will be paired in some form with other opportunities for people to submit their testimony and their lived experience to us. So we're thinking, if you can't attend a listening session, then perhaps there might be an opportunity to upload some type of recording or a video, or even if we're just create some type of voicemail to be able to submit some other your experiences and your background in some form. So, we're hoping to get that established in the next couple months. And we would ultimately, we'll come back to the board at the November Housing Committee as well, with a report out on what we've heard and how we're looking at the update. Where are the areas to improve upon the document, and how things may be updated and changed. So, you know, if in the meantime, if you all would be interested in helping with some of the outreach, or at least sharing that we are doing it, and kind of promoting some of the opportunities for outreach, I'd appreciate that. Looks like we have a couple questions. Yeah.
Go ahead, Jill.
Yeah, thanks so much for that update, Megan. I really appreciate it. I'm definitely happy to kind of help, you know, with outreach and promotion, if that, however, Navaha and I can do that. And I guess just for clarification, are you hoping to bring to the Board of Supervisors the administrative guidelines and the relocation plan together at the same time? Is that the goal?
That's a great question. Actually, the administrative guidelines are moving ahead of the relocation plan update. Right now, we're scheduled to have the authorization for a public hearing on the administrative guidelines at the September 12th board meeting. And then we'll hold the public hearing on the administrative guidelines at the September 26th board meeting.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Hey, Megan, I had two questions.
Go ahead.
The first one is the importance of where you have the events for the listening sessions. What we found in Herndon, when we did them in government facilities or the town hall, a lot of the folks that had that experience were not as willing to come in to be around government centers. So we started trying to have events in homeowners associations and out in the units, or sometimes the schools. So that's always helpful. And the other thought is engaging the Fairfax County public school systems when you talked about relocation, the impacts to the kids and changing schools, and what is and isn't true as you go through that process. Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah. Great, John. Thank you. Jerry saw your note in the chat, and we'll make sure we follow up with you all with more information as Megan prepares that, so that we can help promote. And John, to your point, you know, we had some of the preservation, the outreach. Jill and I, Paul Zarowski from participated in one of the sessions that was held at the Kathy Hudgens Community Center in Southgate, and that really was a comfortable place where people are used to going. And we had, I think, some great turnout of residents, not just you know, people like us. So, thank you. Any other questions or comments? I can't see. Then I am with that, and really want to thank you all. I know there's a lot going on. We're going to move into subcommittee updates, or committee updates, subcommittee updates, and what's been happening. I think I would preface that I'm going to call first on Jerry, and I know he's got a listening ear here on some of the things that are coming up. I did just want to again reiterate, Rip has offered to make himself available. And Jerry, before I turn it over to you to talk about our preliminary draft that we would like, you know, that we shared with you all and that we'll take and the process you want to use this year. I wanted to note that we, working with Tom and the FCRHA and Jerry, we added some information about some important federal legislation, and we don't always do that. That hasn't been a mechanism, and just calling your attention to it with the expansion and support of the LIHTC program and some other improvements to really do that. But I note that, you know, on the House bill that was introduced, HR 3238, and that was by Darren LaHood, Don Beyer was one of the introducing co-sponsors, as well as Republican Rob Whitman from Virginia. And so it shows again throughout Virginia the importance of that program in advancing our housing mission. And then our Jennifer McClellan, Jennifer Wexton, and Jerry Connolly are all co-sponsors of that bill. Mark Warner's a co-sponsor of the companion Senate bill. But that was an area getting into that, and then corresponding recommendations for the state that we haven't seen, but it's risen to the top. I know it's been very important to the development community, and Nick and others spoke to these efforts on the bond cap and the LIHTC program allocations in Virginia. And so those are things that we want to continue to lift up. It was a little outside of what our normal. So I call that out for those of you that regularly meet at the congressional level to make sure that we will make sure that they know how important these efforts are to us here in Virginia and Fairfax County. So Jerry, I'm going to turn it over to you to take us through the document as the preliminary and what process you want to use this year.
Yeah, thanks so much, Carrie. So I think everybody hopefully has had a chance to look at the document of August 9th. I want to say that the work of the Legislative Committee is a work in progress. So we're learning new things about how to work better every day. My wife calls me a work in progress as well. So I apologize to the committee, who really wasn't engaged effectively in the drafting of this, but I do think we had a very robust conversation at our June full AHAC meeting, particularly about the matters that rose to prominence within FCRHA about the, setting the limits, the 20 million bond value cap limits. We did have good conversation about that, and that's embedded in this August 9th submission to the staff of the county and the boards of supervisors in framing what we would offer as initial remarks about the legislative agenda, which will not be finalized until probably December of this year, but right now is the time within which to help shape better input. So you can see, as a quick look, we want to elevate the affordability of housing as a priority. We want to build stronger efforts on the low-income housing tax credits. As Carrie mentioned, we do want to even focus on a broader, better partnership at the federal level. It's going to take federal, state, and local effort to fulfill our larger goals. And some of that is then in this. The county's legislative staff contract with somebody to do the advocacy on our county's behalf in Congress. So this would be a way of directing Claudia and her team, if they accept our recommendations, to move through that venue. And then, the obvious, improving the Virginia Housing Trust Fund, assisting and protecting low-income residents, increasing investments in permanent supportive housing, expanding home ownership and preservation, fair housing, and zoning moderation. So I offer this to open up conversations. It can, and hopefully with greater collective input, can be strengthened. But do want to say I'm very grateful to Tom and his team and Carrie for getting us to this point so well. So open for any questions or comments about both the content as well as the process. I think we want to improve both.
Nick, go ahead.
Two quick points. For AHCIA, the Housing Credit Improvement Act, we were on the Hill in late June. Organization that we kind of brought folks in, kind of did a field trip. We met with 17 different members to kind of pitch for it. Generally good response. My understanding is that it's largely well received. They're kind of taking what they call a Noah's Ark approach, where if you're a Democrat who supports the bill, you have to bring a Republican so that it looks incredibly bipartisan. But there's actually a lot more Democrat support than it's currently being led onto. My understanding is the biggest issue, one, the entire AHCIA is not going to get passed. They don't think in it, in its entirety that it would, but pieces and parts are more likely to be included, but they need to find a vehicle to get those legislations through, right? So, if there's some sort of overarching kind of tax bill or something else that they can kind of, attach it to, they could, it could happen, or parts of it could be happen. So that's at least what I know on the HCIA. On the volume cap issues across the state for tax exempt bonds and kind of the 4% credits, there's a lot of rumbling going on right now coming out of both Virginia Housing and DHCD that there's going to be some fairly large programmatic changes as it relates to how those resources are awarded, which will be kind of interesting. Right now, they've been by right, and they've been, we all make sure if our applications are under $20 million, that they get in right away. So we're all kind of waiting around for guidance from the DHCD and Virginia Housing on those. So I certainly think it's worth pushing this $20 million bond cap, especially for deals that we have in Fairfax County. But I'll be interested to see how and if anything happens as it relates to the program. Right now, we're kind of business as usual with an ear to the ground that, something could change. So.
Thanks so much, Nick. I think you
Sure.
raise a couple of good process points as well. Things can happen outside of our direct orbit by associations that may have better access to powers that be in Congress and in the state as well. So I think we are all on a learning journey of how that works and how better to employ it on our collective behalf on into the future. So thanks so much for sharing.
On the federal side, I mean, there's a lot of national resources going into and supporting lobbying and, AHCIA and making sure that happens. So, I think it's certainly worth our time and effort to understand what's going on there and kind of to be supportive. But quite honestly, we'd be the little fish in the big
Right.
pond, and our efforts are probably more well focused at kind of state and local legislative that immediately directly affects what's going on here.
Yep, wise counsel. Thank you. Eleanor?
So I was reading the document that you referenced. First, nice job in creating such a concise summary. And I'm wondering, as an agency that's represented in the AHAC as part of the advocacy committee, and that's some of the work that we do, some of our advocacy priorities are intentionally aligned with all of the different entities that we partner with. So the AHAC priorities, there's some of those that align perfectly with what we're doing as an organization. It's the same with Navajo and so on and so forth. So the question for me as I look at the list, which is a long list, right, is if we're guiding the Board of Supervisors, if we had a magic wand and we could totally influence their decision in a way that gives us the best ROI for our advocacy, how would we prioritize these things that are listed? Because at some point they're going to have to make it, right? There's like a decision point. So if we were informing them, not wanting to show any favoritism to the children that we have that we're looking at, right? But which of these would it would be helpful for us to know, because that impacts, how you package, how you present, where you put more emphasis or not. So that's my question. I'm just wondering about that. If you could provide some guidance.
I don't think I could provide guidance right now on such a tough question. I think our goal was first to get the list together and to build upon what we had done in the previous year. So it is a Herculean challenge to know the minds of our elected officials on all of these matters, because they are complex and not everybody is at the same point in the learning curve. So to kind of come up with our own internal prioritization would require much greater outreach than I have done so far on behalf of the legislative committee to drive ourselves towards that ranked consensus about these priorities. So I would see that as a future effort, one that probably I wouldn't propose that we have the energy to do that in a very short period of time because our clock ticks for the December finalization of the 2024 legislative package from the boards of supervisors. And that's the narrow domain that we're working within. Mary?
Yeah, Jerry, what are the next steps for the legislative committee for this session beyond the memo that was just sent?
So I think we wanted to get the input today from the executive committee about, the general feeling about this August 9th memo. And then I would propose organizing a committee meeting early next month sometime and bring it back to the specific legislative committee and draw greater input from everybody. I know, Mary, you and I have had a little bit of offline conversation about things that could be strengthened, particularly around the language on fair housing, but I'm sure others have similar kinds of reflections. I just see this as a wonderful step this year for our legislative committee to get in early and to guide the larger community about our input. As I said, I'll take this conversation and the August 9th memo to this new group dealing with housing for seniors and try to to gain their appreciation of what advocacy would take in order to achieve our collective ends. Does that help?
And the role of and what we're supposed to be doing, even if we have a discussion about the memo, what would be the next work product of this committee? I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, I think it would be to Carrie, maybe you want to step in here, but I would see it as reflecting a larger consensus than the August 9th memo and reflecting the group's beliefs about what we need to do. I don't think we have a specific position on how we should advocate with specific state legislators on all of these matters. We work through the county really as a...
I understand that. I'm just asking what is the next step and what is our process and what's the next step and what are we trying to achieve with the legislative committee?
Yeah.
And how do we get there?
Are
we there? Is that it? Is it over for this year?
Oh,
that
no.
memo?
I don't think at all. And I see we're going to go to John and Joe, but I would just comment that you all know in previous years, we've developed much more detail, like we included a whole page of recommendations around fair housing. This was Jerry and I wanting to be upfront at the first deadline that the committee chair and the county exec had set, just to make sure we were there in front of them with the highlights of the memo and the important step that FCRHA had taken to highlight the federal and the Virginia legislation. So that was, as Jerry said, the first step, and then we'll move from there. Let's go to, John, was that previous or? Yep, no, John and then Joe.
So it's NFL season. We're starting to play football again. And you ever see the coaches, they've got this plastic sheet and typically they have the first 5 plays already set. And then based on what happens, they'll go back and pick different plays. And that's true for businesses. It's true for all the government work I've done. You have a plan and after the first few minutes, it all disappears and you get flexible. So it isn't as important that you prioritize these legislative plans, but you have the top topics. And depending on the legislative moves and budgets and politics, you're able to go back and pull it and pull other things through it. So what's important is we have a list that includes the different functions and the importance of what we have, and prioritizing it isn't as important. And then more importantly is what we see what Fairfax County has done typically, and it's just nature, to go back and take what they did last year and they repost it, right? And they'll make changes to it. And I think where we're going is that's good, but we can do better. And that's what we're going to look at, those same kinds of problems, because that's what the county's doing down in Richmond, is taking all of our priorities along with all the other things that they're trying to do and figuring out where they can plug them in. So by us using that same language, looking at the template, I'd suggest we go back to what the state has done for the planning, their planning strategy, and look at that language as well, and try to put everything we have in their language. So we prioritize in a sense of what they have for their 3 strategies, what we have for our 7 different elements, and show what the benefit is and how we can help. And that's going to help our folks when they get down to Richmond. Thanks.
And Joe, you had your hand raised, but you took it down.
Just to not confuse the screen. So all I wanted to say was you stepping back perhaps a little bit from the specifics of this cycle. I think referencing some of the things we've talked about before relative to our role, especially as it relates to the board, and taking up sort of Dr. Vincent's point, it seems to me that one of our regularly scheduled activities as the legislative cycle begins, as the budget cycle begins, is that 1 or 2 or 3 of us, and you know, maybe it's July, maybe that's the right time, meet with each board member, and so different groups, not the same 1, 2, or 3 meeting with all of them, but you know, we divide them up and we go out and we have these conversations in advance of some of the work that we need to do to help inform that priority discussion that Dr. Brinson's talking about, so that not only are we obviously getting their thoughts once we've sort of crafted our perspective, but we're hearing, it's not going to be perfect, it's not going to be totally baked, but we're hearing what they're individually thinking about, again, relative to legislative, relative to the budget, relative to whatever topics, you know, are before us, to help us help them.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No, thanks so much, Joe. I think that's, you know, wise counsel based upon historical input, especially at the local budget level, with groups like the Alliance for Human Services, wanting to sit down with every member of the board to get input as well as to give input to them. And I think a July cycle would be a worthy one to pursue, although it's obviously summer bound. But I think it's aspirational. The right kind of goal for ourselves is to build relationships. And this year, coming year in particular, when we could have at least 2 new members of the boards of supervisors, we have an urgency on behalf of our large venture to establish some strong communication pathways in the time cycles relevant for us to advocate for better legislative policies.
Thank you, Jerry, and for your work on this, and Tom and Linda Hoffman and others who have really helped us shape this. And I think it goes to what was just said. We are getting more feedback from boards of supervisors thanking us for the input. Supervisor Walkinshaw reached back out to me to say, thank you, we'll be in touch with you all. Supervisor Fowles, Chairman McKay, others acknowledged AHEC's comments on fair housing when they adopted the policy. And so I think it continue to be important to be there, and we'll move forward with that. Actually, Mary, since you're here, if I may put you on the spot, just a quick, you know, on fair housing, if you want to say anything. I know we have some good news on the staff front.
Sure. We had the board on July 25th at their meeting. They accepted the COG report that included some items from Fairfax County on goals and strategies for fair housing. But they did take our advice on 3 things. And one was to prioritize some goals. They accepted a lot of goals and a lot of strategies in that report, maybe more than can be possibly done. So our recommendation was to prioritize the goals into things that can be actually accomplished and show some progress, short-term and long-term. They agreed with our recommendation to form an administrative structure that can help coordinate the 4 different departments involved in implementing fair housing goals, and to do that at the county executive level. And I was very pleased to meet this week with Evan Braff, and the county executive officer, and his title says coordinator. That's kind of a vague title, but I guess he takes on big projects like this that need to be pulled together at the county executive level. And he seemed very enthusiastic about this, so I'm quite happy. And he has a plan, and he agrees with all of our ideas about, prioritizing, measuring, having metrics, having evaluation, kind of doing it that way and actually showing some progress. That's going to take a little while because, but it's okay because we're in a kind of uncertain space with the federal guidelines right now. The new guidelines, the new rule on this will come out in the spring, but we kind of know what it's going to be. So it's not too soon to get working on it, especially the administrative structure. And the other thing was to really have a lot of public engagement in the fair housing process. And we talked about that. And I think he's open to doing that both through the typical, put out a document and have people comment on it through that process, but also through the real community meetings with support from the NCS and people getting out and just talking about their issues and trying to capture that and record it and apply it. And then not just take information out of the community like we tend to do so many times, but actually to come back with them with ideas and with information about what's been done with their information. So that we had a good meeting. So I'm hopeful that we're getting off on a good start with not a start with fair housing, but a good restart with fair housing. It has to restart because HUD changed the rules and we have the new COG goals. And I think Fairfax is coming to where it's going to be ready to make a good restart. Okay. That's it.
Thanks so much, Mary, and thanks for all your work. I think you really brought it home, and we were pleased to be a part of that. Terrific job. Next, Joe, can we turn it to you for an update on budget and certainly the carryover that we're all interested in?
Sure. Thanks, Carrie. So the county executive provided carryover to the board at their last meeting in July, which is the typical schedule. Carryover basically identifies preliminarily how the fiscal year that ended, that June 30th ended, and what needs to be done as sort of the first round of changes to the budget that was adopted in May for the fiscal year that just began July 1. There are lots and lots of things that go on in carryover as a result of the fact that, to a lot of extent, June 30th and July 1 are arbitrary dates. And so there's, technical movement of funding. But there's also typically the opportunity for some funding for priorities that maybe were not included in the annual process. And clearly the point in the development of a dedicated funding stream for affordable housing means that we rely very much on these available resources at the quarterly reviews. Jumping sort of to the point, for consideration by the board after all of the adjustments that are recommended by the county executive are taken into account, not assuming that the board adopts all of them, but sort of the starting point in terms of what's available. There's between $12 and $14 million that the county executive identified as being available. Given the timing of this meeting, I can't say absolutely what Supervisor Palchik is going to do, but as you all know, she has been part of the group of 3 or 4 board members each year over the last couple of years who has put forward a consideration item at the various quarterly reviews for an amount to go to affordable housing. I have a draft of that consideration item for her when she returns to the office on Monday. I'm fairly confident that she and her colleagues will do that again this year. I can't say what that number is going to be. It'll be between, I think that the numbers that we've used the last couple of years, 5, 8, 10 million is reasonable to expect, but I can't say exactly where it's going to end up. But that consideration item, which, as you know, is the opportunity for individual or group of board members to say, okay, in the context of the conversation we're having about funding, we'd like to do this. And so, as you all know, that has been well received in terms of the affordable housing consideration items that have been made up until this point, and would expect that that kind of focus continues. In addition, and I was hoping it was supposed to come out this week, and it may still today, but I have not seen it yet. There is another update from staff about the federal dollars that are as of yet unspent. There's a large amount that's unspent and identified in carryover. There's a much, much smaller amount that has not yet been sort of publicly laid out. There have been individual decisions by board members, including relative to affordable housing, that will be summarized in this report. I would anticipate that when it comes out, and as soon as it does, we can share it with everybody. It will formally identify another tranche of that funding, probably the last tranche, because we're getting down to the end of those allocations, other than the fact that I'm sure, based on the way the expenditures have been identified, there'll be some what I would call cleanup at the end of the process to say, okay, there's a little bit of money here and there's a little bit of money there. We're not talking about millions and millions, but there'll be one more shot at the apple, I guess I would say. But this discussion, hopefully either today or next week, will help us, I think, understand what's in the mix for affordable housing over the coming months, and will be part of, obviously, the conversation relative to carryover. Certainly by our discussion at the full AHAC committee on the 22nd, a lot of these details will be known. There will be a budget committee meeting that week on the Tuesday, which will also summarize all of the movement since the July memo, with then action by the board at the September 26th board meeting, at which point I would assume, given some of the moving parts, we would want to provide public comment. And so, big picture, that's sort of where we are. Unfortunately, a couple things not yet nailed down. Stepping back a little bit, I think as we look at our ability to advocate, and I give full credit to Mary for this. She and I've talked a couple times. She's working from the perspective of some of her other roles on some advocacy, much of which runs in parallel to ours. There are some pieces of information that would, I think, be helpful. And again, thanks to Mary for raising this, to the conversation, specifically as it relates to rent relief and sort of what our spend is. It's obviously, again, a sort of parallel track. The county feels, I think, that the funding that they have put in place through a variety of different sources is sufficient for FY24, but there's a little bit of a black hole in terms of where exactly those pieces are coming from and what exactly the current spend is. And so it may be that as part of our advocacy over the next month, one of the things we want to do is ask for a little bit more clarity on a regular basis as to those pieces of information, which again, I think help them inform what the need is. And Mary, just again, thank you for that. Is there anything you would add to that portion of the conversation?
Yeah, I think during COVID, they put out pretty good information on the demand as counted by calls coming in to 222 and what the topics were of each of those calls. And they also put out how much they spent each month on different things, housing, utilities, food. So it was pretty clear what was going on, whether things were getting better or worse, or was the supply keeping up with the demand. And they quit doing that report, and now they sent me another type of report, but it's not the same. It doesn't show the money going out. It shows the demand side, but it doesn't show how much is going out every month. And I know it's a whole lot less because there's a whole lot less federal money, but we need to. I still want to see what the supply and demand sides are on this and whether it's adequate, because we keep hearing on the street that it's not, that people are really suffering and it's not adequate. And we need to monitor that, and we need to talk about it and see what we can do to help people.
Thanks, Mary. Mary, did you have another comment or can I go to Jerry?
No, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead,
Okay.
Jerry. Jerry, can't hear you. You're muted.
I just want us to be clear, Joe, you've argued for perhaps a formal response from AHAC to the carryover proposition when it becomes more fully elucidated. We also have informal processes by which each of us can be articulate with our own member of the boards of supervisors and others. And then to augment what Mary just stated, I think we also need to understand we're dwelling within two domains of human services vulnerabilities. The collapse of federal additional support for SNAP benefits earlier this spring is not yet fully played out amongst all the people who had been dependent upon that. And we are in the midst as a county in doing a re-registration of 100,000 people who got emergency federal health benefit support. So there's fears that some will fall through the cracks in that process, which gives, again, a greater endangerment for the essential family support of shelter costs, making sure they're capable of meeting them. So I just would put that out as an additional anxiety worthy of tracking, as Mary would argue, for us to all keep that in mind because people are endangered in a number of different additional ways.
Thanks, Jerry. Tom Fleetwood, I see.
So a couple things that I'd like to note here. First, with respect to the situation involving the emergency assistance, I'm thinking that it might be a good idea for our partners from Neighborhood and Community Services to participate in that in anything having to do with that conversation, given that they operate that program in its entirety. So, we can certainly be a conduit for information, but I think to fully engage on that side of things is going to require their involvement directly. Second, I just kind of wanted to note for context here, relative to the federal dollars that have come to us specifically for housing development. You'll recall that we've gotten via 3 tranches a total of $45 million under ARPA. And I can, we have expended 30 million, like literally expended 30 million. We have committed through board action another 8, and the remaining 6 we believe is going to be committed to another project very shortly. So, just so y'all know, the in effect, the entirety of that $45 million is spoken for and has been put into action.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good.
Thanks.
Tom,
Go ahead.
I just wanted to comment to Tom that I have been working directly with Sarah Allen on these numbers and was through COVID, and still I'm in touch with her about that. So she is my source of information.
That's I really appreciate that, Mary, and I'm glad I am aware of that, and I would only add to that going forward, that further work that AHAC does in that respect with respect to budget advocacy needs to be coordinated with them.
I would agree. I know that Chris Leonard did present this presentation that Joe's talking about, presented at the Human Service Council on Monday, and then shared it with a number of us. We got to talk through that and some of the issues, and it's very clear that whether it's on the housing side, which we know there's a commitment, to understand and do more and what we can build into our advocacy, but also on the rental assistance, we know there's at least, one more tranche of funding that is committed as they are looking at where's the greatest need. And as one of the agencies that has helped to distribute that funding over 10, 11 million. I can't remember how much we've done and how many people we are also going back and staying in touch with folks, trying to find out how they're doing. So I know that we're going to get information on that. And it has come up in some of my conversations with you all about needing a report on that and understanding what, the impact of that investment. Where are we now? And so I think the county staff are very well aware of it and are looking forward to actually talking with us and briefing us on that. So I'm sure Tom will get that presentation, or Joe, as soon as it's available. If not, we'll make sure we get that out to everybody. It hasn't yet been posted. So thank you. Are there any other comments? Thank you, Joe, Jerry, Mary, for your leadership in these 3 committees. We have also had the work that Eleanor and John did initially, and Maura, on the homelessness, when we were looking at that as a task force sort of coming in. And again, the impact that we had in being able to answer some questions, the status, what's happening, where there are opportunities for permanent supportive housing. One of the things Tom Barnett and I spoke yesterday with a local reporter and talked about, particularly something that we're very proud of, Tom, the fact that among all the development that's happening, all the housing opportunities, we've really are seeing a lot more being done in the permanent supportive housing, which is so necessary to serve our most vulnerable. And so that was really important to get out there in this group. And of course, our new member, Sarah D'Souza, who is from Hunter Mill, has been a real lead in that as well. So the committee structure has worked. It has been, and it sort of leads me in very quickly into the next conversation, just an update on our work plan and priorities. And so I thank all of you. If you haven't yet, you will hear from my colleague, Erin Clark, who is reaching out to everybody on AHAC to set up a quick conversation with me or Rip, and we're working on getting those meetings scheduled. One of the things we really wanted to look back at sort of what we have achieved. And while, Jerry, in your words, yes, there are things we need to do, I think AHAC has really taken a step forward. And what I've heard from people so far and the 10, 12 conversations I've had already is that feeling that, we are on the right track and that we've had some great success that we can point to. And now where do we go with that? And so what we are doing now, we originally had a work plan that was driven from the charter. Our charter, now that it has been revised, some of the questions I've had from people is sort of, do we each understand where the focus is? Certainly the monitoring of the development and preservation, the policy recommendations on what would ensure that we're meeting the goals, that we're looking at things through an equity lens. And I think to the relocation guidelines updates that are being done and how getting input from the community, how does that help us make some recommendations. So I've heard a lot about that and maybe needing to make sure we understand sort of who we're talking about. 60% AMI and below, 60 to 80, and sort of understanding. So there are some members who are still asking some questions about where should our focus be, how much do we do around these interrelated issues that we've just spent some time talking about. But lots of kudos for the work by the committees and sort of helping us understand. There has been some suggestion that because we are a large committee, and I referenced earlier, for example, the Tenant Landlord Commission, which has such there's so much data and so much stuff that we could do. I think it's like a 10 or 12 member commission. They have 3 members now. The chairman, who's very active, is a realtor and is fluent in Spanish, actually, which is really great. And so he does a lot of outreach, and 2 tenant members, and they haven't been able to fill any of the other seats. There is, I think there is some potential, and I've heard this from others, a need for reaching out and establishing how could our impact be legislative budget if we knew that there was consensus on the housing recommendations from ASSB, from tenant landlord, from, AHAC taking the lead. We certainly know that Jerry and others really do a great job of representing us from HSC. So I have put together a list of all the BACs and people, members that may represent us, who are the liaison, of course, our members that serve on AHAC, and I'll be bringing that back to you. I think there's an opportunity, just as we heard from Joe, when the budget committee is going to meet, some other opportunities we have to influence, starting to pull together the infrastructure that allows us to be more aware of getting that two-way input. I heard from some members, I did talk with people who are leaving, either because they're like Alice Foltz, or who are moving on. And so Jennifer, Adeli, and some others, I'll have some recommendations there. But it was suggested that because this is such a large committee and there's such a diversity of representation, that not all voices are always able to be heard, and that certain priorities have driven the conversation, and yet there's great interest in talking about other issues, other policies that we need to move forward. Nick, hearing you talk about, just having us understand the impact, for example, of, some of the financing and some of the developer concerns. So one of the recommendations that's again coming out, and I'll summarize these, are how could we do some learning sessions, maybe even in advance of a meeting, but some sessions where people can just get comfortable on topics that they're not, or even having a breakout session, even at our September meeting, where we could have smaller groups exploring some of the committees that we've assigned that really haven't met, and what are those areas. And it achieves both what John talked about, that we have the list of the things that fit our charter and that are important, and then moving forward, how do we prioritize those things? If there's something that rises to the top on the policy recommendations, or that FCRHA or Tom say are really critical this year, or advocates say that, how would we move it forward? So I'm going to be trying to get all of this summarized and to a work plan to share with you all prior to our September meeting, at least a sense of where we should go and how we might organize our work from this year. Again, leaning on members themselves to maybe research issues, represent us to other committees, bringing that back. Our staff have so much to do with all the good work that we need to take a harder, but we also need to drive for consensus, and ensuring that even here we are representing all voices is a pretty consistent theme. The most important thing that has come out, and it's John's soapbox boiling is always my favorite in terms of where we go next, and I think we're there, is all of this information we have. John knows I love him, and I think it brings everything together so clearly. How do we take this information and now really break out into a communications group that allows us to synthesize, synergize, and then move forward on these priorities, so that each of us has that cheat sheet, that list, that when we're talking with someone. So that's just some of what's I've been doing to hear input from people. I think the majority, and I've spoken with some of you, probably half of you on the call so far, and I really do appreciate the input. If there's anything else, those that I've spoken to that I've missed, please feel free to speak up. But I'm hoping this will drive our 24 and even into our 25 work.
Great.
Comments, questions? Please say yes when Aaron reaches out, and we'll complete these calls hopefully in the next couple weeks. Thank you. So that is going back to the agenda. The last little bit is really just talk about our next meeting. We do have our full council meeting on September 22nd. We're going to come back, and then the next meeting is scheduled for December. So we'll have 2 meetings before a new board elected, at least 2 new members of the board. So we will have 2 meetings to impact some of the work we talked about today. And then I just wanted to note for the executive committee that, looking at the agenda and the timing for this, we are proposing a change in our executive committee meeting schedule that you will have seen from Megan. to meet October 27th and then December 8th. And both of those enable us to be ready, for some of the items. I'd just like to ask concurrence of the group here that those 2 dates, October 27th and December 8th, are good for our executive committee.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Now I'm going to go back to our next meeting in September and just ask Tom, Megan, we know we have some standing issues. Anything that we've started to draft the agenda. Are there things that we talked about? And then I'll go to the group about what we're going to say, how we want to spend that time, and sort of the welcome back with some new members, and whether or not it makes sense to have some level of breakout conversations on some of the issues on the work plan, or keeping together certainly some reports on where we're going. We know the legislative will have an update there. Tom or Megan first, and then others. I'd love your input on the agenda. Tom, go ahead. Thank you.
So I would suggest that we have a report out on the status of the RFP for the 24 funds. So, and I think that's a good way to sort of help educate new members about one of the kind of central duties of AHEC, which is helping, oversee and provide advice and guidance with respect to, with respect to how we do that work. So we expect to have the NOFA issued here very shortly. I know that there are some of you that are especially not interested in that. But I would also, I would think it's important to use that as an educational tool too for new members.
Thank you. And Joe Fay has made the note in the chat that the question about sort of orientation and onboarding for members, because we are starting new. We have done some of that, and some of you have been wonderful about being willing to pair up with a new member and sort of bring that. We want to definitely formalize that, I think do a little bit more, but this meeting could be a good start because that book is pretty overwhelming. And fortunately, some of the new members that are coming on have some long experience and sort of, interest in this field, but it'll be good to orient them towards what we've done so far.
If I could just very briefly, just also mention as a reminder, kind of going into the fall, that we remain deeply constrained from a staffing standpoint, and that we're going to do, as we always try to do, the very best we can, but just ask everyone for their patience as we work to fill some of those deficits that we have. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. And that message is loud and clear. And I think that's one of the things, as I've talked with members, they are willing to come to the table and lead some of the conversation and, make sure that we're covering some of those topics. There's been a real interest on the homelessness side. How can we ensure that as the new COC is named and is convened, while those members undoubtedly are coming to the table with interest and experience on the issues of homelessness, we have done a lot of work in that area. And what is the handoff? For example, what is the conversation? And if I open the mics to Maura and to Eleanor and Joe, they will talk to you at length about, some of the policy and funding and other issues that could really, strengthen. And those are issues. How do we ensure that handoff is made? And then again, continue to focus on the housing piece of that, housing the most vulnerable. And I'll send out a link if you haven't seen it. HUD has done a report on, tying back to rental assistance, sort of what's been going on in terms of the most vulnerable residents. That is, I think, very instructive. I'll get that out. Other topics for September. not, I obviously our standard agenda, Mary, Jill. Oh, Jill, I'm sorry. Jill was there and I didn't see. She kind of fell off the screen. Jill?
Sorry, I don't know what happened. My phone tried to connect. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm very sorry. I don't know where I went. Just a note, and I do recognize, and appreciate Tom's comment about staff capacity, but I think one of the most beneficial things that I was, had as part of AHAC, I think when I was unofficially on AHAC with Virginia Housing, is Tom and staff kind of did an overview about the different departments and the staff members and who reported to who. So just as an orientation, I think that can be just extremely beneficial for new members just to understand how the department's organized. So not to add more work to the staff, but it is helpful for new members to kind of conceptualize the breadth of work that this department does, frankly, and maybe who the lead team members are.
Tom?
So just a comment.
Thanks, Jill.
What I would say on that is, I would be very happy to do that. I think I don't know if there would be benefit to that being a refresher for everybody, and we put it on as an item in September.
Yeah.
I don't see any problem doing that, and I'd be very happy to do that.
Thank you. I think that would
Tom,
help in September.
Thank you, Jill. Tom, I would remind you, you did this, I think, 2 years for us when we were first getting started, and there was a good overview of the departments and how you interact with other agencies in the org chart. I think that was really helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we can do that.
Again, I'll make my pitch. Done as a synoptic video would allow us to share that much broader than the few people who will come to either the September full meeting or to executive committee meetings. And it helps us to educate the broader public to these matters. So, and that could be reviewed every year to see how current it is to you and your work, Tom. But I can't imagine we could force you to do 15 of these generalized presentations. We really need one good one. And if it's on video, we could share it to our heart's desire and take input for additional questions that people might have.
Thank you all. Are there any other comments? Otherwise, I would like to be able to, any other business? Eleanor. Oh, Jerry, I'm sorry. I'm going to go to Eleanor and then Jerry.
I actually had a quick question. So we had talked last year about having a calendar for the year as we prep for the legislative session. And I know we're only now like 4 months away from that. So I'm wondering about the status of that, if we have it, if we still plan on having it. That's my question. And my comment, really, this is actually for you, Carrie. It's not on the agenda, and it's probably never going to be on an agenda, but I wanted to just say thank you for all the work that you are doing in terms of co-chairing this committee. We recognize that as somebody who is independently leading an agency yourself, that you have a full plate. We recognize what that means. And what you're doing in this position, in this role, takes up a lot of time. I mean, even more than I think we may appreciate or recognize. So just wanted to publicly say thank you for your commitment. All the work that you're doing is such a thankless job, but you continue to do. And, so that's it. I can't say any more than that. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Let the record show that we appreciate what you're doing and all the time that you put into it.
Thank you. Back at you. We all are here because we're so committed to this work. So it's all of us. And I think that, thank you. I will just say that the calendar, Megan has started something we 100% agree, having something in front of us, and I'm going to get some of you to help me take that off Megan's plate, but make sure we're keeping that up, and that was something that came up for September. And I'll rely on some of the committee chairs in terms of the timing of specific things, but we can include legislative. There are events when there are groundbreakings, and congratulations on your groundbreaking. And, or that we should be celebrating and supporting and showing the community that while we have a long way to go and there is great need, I think Fairfax County can be very proud of the work that it is doing across the board, the number of units we are producing, preserving, and the work we're doing to look at housing for the most vulnerable. So thank you. With that, thank you. Oh, Jerry, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I just wanted to echo what Eleanor said about your contributions, Carrie. It is amazing, and we are all so much better for it. But we're also building community, even in this small group today. And I don't want to be remiss about recognizing, having gained her permission to do so, to say that our dear friend Marlene Blum had a stroke earlier this month and is recuperating extraordinarily well. She's now become one of the best advocates for making sure that you get the emergency medicine within 4 hours of having a stroke. It requires you to recognize that you are having a stroke, but it also requires you to get to emergency medical care. And if you can do this within 4 hours, your medical care changes dramatically the long-term sequelae of having a stroke. Marlene, I couldn't recognize in her voice that she had any medical problems. So, just keep her in our loving hearts as well. But also she would urge you to recognize the importance for yourself and for your loved ones of befalling a tragedy like having a stroke and getting to the medical care instantaneously if you can. There's a 4-hour window to take special blood clot eliminating medicines that can wreak an enormously beneficial impact upon your recuperation. So I just want to leave us with hopefulness on her behalf, but also say thank you, and let's build stronger communities where we care about the issue, but we care about each other as well.
Thank you, Jerry. I know that's really important. Thanks for that. And we'll get something out to Marlene on behalf of all of us, just to share our love with her and others who have been through this themselves and their families. So thank you. Well, with that, it's a Friday afternoon, sort of the last hurrah of the summer. I've been up since 5 a.m. with the Reston Fox News at Reston Town Center, so I'm all wired with coffee, and it was a lot of fun. But I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Poggi. I'm getting the
I
claps.
second.
Thank you
I
all.
second.
Thank you. Go forward and do great things. I will work with Megan and Tom to get a draft of our agenda out to you all to look at. Again, some focus for the work plan, and ask for you all. We are also going to really work to try and get materials out in advance for people so that they have time to review them. So thank you all. And Malia, Megan, Tom, thank you for all the support that you do behind the scenes. So
Thank
and in
you.
front. Thanks, guys.
you
Have a
all.
great one.
Okay, have a
Bye.
good one.
Bye-bye. Thank you.